Episode 43 is a follow-up of episode 44, so I kindly request you to first listen to episode 43 to connect with our discussion in episode 44. Thank you very much and enjoy the episode. As you mentioned about the international law, so how do international laws and treaties address the intersection of espionage, space industry, and hybrid warfare?
Intersection is a very interesting question, and when I saw this question, I was actually very excited to answer this. International laws governing espionage, they look at a range of legal instruments that try to regulate intelligence activities between states, and these laws, they aim to prevent hostile actions while also allowing some form of legitimate intelligence gathering. So our Open Skies Treaty was something like that, where there was a group of countries that allowed gathering information through whatever methods, as long as we inform them that yes, we're doing this at this time period. Then additionally, there are treaties related to hybrid warfare that address issues such as cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and other non-traditional forms of aggression. For example, the Talon Manual 2.0 on the international law applicable to cyber operations, they provide a very strong guideline on how there are existing international law which apply to cyber warfare. Now, if I look at cyber warfare in combination with space capabilities, then we limit our space laws to just the existing treaties and probably the other UNGA guidelines that have been given to us. But most of these other cases, specifically when it comes to an intersection, they all fall under international criminal law, because espionage after a point becomes a crime, and I think there we look at it from an international criminal law point of view. And this the intersection of the three areas, international law, space law, and hybrid warfare, they will present to us a complex set of solutions, but also there are certain challenges when it comes to implementation. And for that implementation, we'll have to look at a very combined effort on legal frameworks to ensure some form of security and some form of stability. Because right now, if I'm dealing with a case, I'll have to either look at a precedence, or I'll have to look at it from a new case point of view, because we don't have a set method or a set framework on how to deal with such cases. And that's probably why some of these cases, even when the crime was detected in 2009, they probably took about 8 or 7 years to come up with a solution and then try them for their crimes.
Interesting. And what are the potential consequences of espionage in the space industry on global stability and security, particularly in the context of hybrid warfare?
I think there are 5 ways to look at it. And the first thing is probably the deal breaker, because international relations is built on how we perceive each other and what is the amount of trust I have on somebody else, right? So the first factor or the first consequences of espionage would be the erosion of trust among nations. And in many cases, if I am involving in a espionage against somebody else's industry, I wouldn't I couldn't afford to lose the relations with them, then that would discourage me from taking up something of this scale. And I think so that erosion of trust will be one of the first factors. The second one is definitely an acceleration in arms race. And this could go both ways. If I find out that they have a technology that I'm not prepared for, then I will start investing on that. If there are rumors that some country is investing on say direct offensive space capabilities, then that will directly relate to me investing on offensive space capabilities. So that acceleration of arms race will be one of the consequences, and it would be the other way around as well. If I don't know what's happening in my adversary's space capabilities, and we saw this happen with the nuclear space race, the sheer fact that we don't know what they're capable of encourages us to invest more and increase our capabilities. So that acceleration of arms race. The next one would be disruption in the global systems itself. So if there is a hybrid warfare, or if there is a series of cyber attacks, then it will disrupt not only my military space capabilities, but it will cause disruption to all of the space capabilities that are available, right? And one of the uh,
Yes.
case could be the chaos in military operation, civilian operations, emergency response systems, international trade. So it will destabilize all of the systems altogether if we don't take care of the trends in espionage, because we don't know how systems may react to them. The next one is a threat to national security. Just the fact that my systems are vulnerable to espionage is a threat to my national security. And this could be the theft of sensitive information, or um, a, a breach of my systems, or even altering my systems in any way, or just blocking or jamming my systems. The last one is again vulnerability to cyber attacks. So, minute this espionage targets space industry, it creates vulnerabilities for cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. Space-based assets are interconnected with terrestrial networks, right? So then they make them susceptible to other cyber intrusions, which can have multiple implications for again civilian and military operations.
Interesting. Yep. I mean, just to, I would say, a little bit go deeper into the space agencies and organization. So,
Hmm.
how do space organizations protect themselves from espionage attempts in the age of hybrid warfare? And what are the potential measures that can be taken to enhance the security?
I think one of the primary methods that some organizations already use, and most organizations should use, is the implementation of very strict access controls and security protocols. These define the way uh, people have access to information. There is this theory, right? When every single individual is working on something, but they don't understand the bigger picture or why it is being done for, then you're cutting off their access to information on how things work. And I think in that way, we have to carefully integrate our protocols in such a way that not one person or not a bunch of people have all the information, or have uh, that vulnerability that somebody could tap upon. Another important measure is the use of encryption and secure communication channels, so that sensitive data and communications are always encrypted. That prevents eavesdropping, or what happened at Stuxnet. We can try and prevent that as much as possible. Like I said, they will still continue to be vulnerable, but we can be prepared as much as possible. The next one is physical security methods that you can use. One is the use of surveillance systems, use of security personnel to monitor and safeguard critical infrastructure and resources. Sometimes companies also conduct regular security audits and assessments to try and see if there are any vulnerabilities that are in the systems or in among the people at the top level, so that we know who is a potential weakness, and we know what is a potential weakness in our security system. And these approaches will allow organizations to stay prepared in case something hits them. Uh, Sometimes there would be very strong collaboration with government agencies, and this is popular among space industries that work on defense space applications, where they have government agencies and law enforcement bodies that provide some form of counter espionage capabilities. Sometimes they work closely with relevant authorities. Sometimes they leverage intelligence infrastructure of the country to identify and mitigate potential threats. And I think if we are going to have multiple private industries working in our country, then as a country, we should provide this capability to our private industries, saying in case you want to have that extra security measure, you can always reach out to us. And I think that will help in removing the foreign espionage activities. But within the country, within among private industries, then this aspect of government agencies will not help. So then they'll have to fall back on their encryption and secure communications capabilities. The last one is investing on advanced cybersecurity technologies and threat detection systems. And these are slowly emerging, especially after those series of cyber attacks that happened in 2019 and 18 and 20, where they help in identifying and responding to cyber threats, including phishing attacks, malware, and other forms of cyber espionage attempts that probably might target sensitive information or sensitive systems.
Okay. And I would say, from the little bit global perspective, can you discuss
Hmm.
the collaboration or competition between nations in space exploration and how this dynamics is influenced by espionage in hybrid warfare scenarios? I'm asking this question
Hmm.
from the perspective, like, for example, you mentioned the peaceful space collaborations
Yeah.
in space exploration. So,
Yes.
that sometimes might be a pathway for infiltration as well. So, this
Yes.
question is from that perspective. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Um, I think I'll start this answer with an example.
Sure.
With what happened to Roscosmos after
Yes.
Russia Ukraine that military engagement began, right? The
Yes.
war. Immediately you had ESA and NASA pulling out of all of their collaborative projects, and these projects were simple humanitarian exploration projects. They had nothing to do with security, but then you had it was symbolic of the break of relations, but also it brings back to the question of collaboration and competition, because the minute that happened, they were back into the zone of competition between each other. And I think that would be um, a good example to try and understand how the space exploration industry um, is extremely vulnerable to the changes in the geopolitical trends. And we can go back to again the example of 1999, when US realized that this transfer of technology is a problem with China. I think that is also a classic case of collaboration turning into competition, because suddenly we realize, oh, they're growing bigger than us, or they're trying to steal our information and trying to benefit out of it. And these examples can they are on the line between espionage, because it's not necessarily fully a case of espionage, right? But you still have this indefinite halting of relations, indefinite um, stopping of cooperation between these countries, just because suddenly there is a competition between nations. And this is because there's a very strong desire for technological advancement, and national prestige always comes into play here. And that is what happened with Roscosmos, ESA, and NASA. um, Another thing is the trust factor. We are collaborating, but the minute I find out that the collaboration has a negative tone to it, then countries necessarily may pull back on their collaboration efforts. And this has probably happened in multiple cases, where the minute trust factor has fallen apart, the collaboration has ended. Um, the militarization of space is another aspect. The militarization of space poses some form of vulnerability to critical space assets. And this may, so then me as a country or me as a private industry, the minute I know my technology has a security tone to it, then I refuse to cooperate with another state, because what happens? What if something goes wrong? What if it may be a problem later on? So I think those vulnerabilities are also seen in the active in the trend between collaboration and competition. At the same time, there is a very strong imperative for nations to develop resilient and secure space capabilities, because every time we cannot say, oh, there is a threat, so we will no longer collaborate, right? Because that cannot happen. And now
Yes.
the threats will continue to increase, because the geopolitical tensions are increasing at a very fast rate. So that form of a very strong resilience and confidence building or securing space capabilities will become the responsibility of the nation to develop, so that companies and the private industries or the R&D continues to work with each other. And I think that is something which will be required to withstand threats, but also work with each other. And that we require very strongly at this point in the space industry.
Yes, I think you're hitting the right point actually.
Mm.
And I would just like to add on that.
Yes, please.
The narrative definition or is, kind of scattered at the moment, but I would just like to mention it in a layman's term, like narrative
Mm.
strategy is very
Yeah.
important as well. I'm coming to that question, but I believe we also had one episode with Dr. Ekaterina Matoi on espionage and the narrative warfare. So setting your own narrative is also very much important. I believe, especially when it comes to the private space companies. For example, we have seen Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Uh, it's SpaceX is currently the only company which is setting its own narrative. Rest all the companies in the space industry are, I would say, just aligning with the government's narrative. Like government
Yeah.
says, don't go there, don't supply instruments to Russia. They say no, we won't. Don't do this in Ukraine. They do it. Don't do this in Ukraine. They don't do it. But
Yeah.
it's only the SpaceX which is doing what it feels it is right for its own ethics and principles.
Yeah.
And of course, the ethics and principle varies for each of the companies, but whatever it might be, but having narrative as a dominant tool
Mm.
or to know how to use the narrative in the
Yeah.
industry can actually give more power to the individuals, organizations, even to the international community as well.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, narrative strategy is also one of the, I mean, additional point which can actually increase more collaboration as well. It's not that narrative strategy only leads to cold wars or conflicts. It is also about kind of repairing the fractured relations
Yes.
and just reinstating all the collaborations as well. So that is where also the narrative strategy plays a very important role.
Very true.
So yeah, and just to add on to this, so this is the, I mean, we are approaching the end of the podcast. So what role do private space companies play in the espionage landscape of the space industry, particularly in hybrid warfare context?
Okay. So when it comes to private space companies or private companies, there are two kinds. One, and these guys are, we have to understand that they are working on, they have to raise their own money, and most times they might be working with some government funding, right? So some of them are government backed entities, some of them
Yes.
are extremely commercial, and so they have different approaches they take when it comes to technologies, sensitive information, and all of that. Your classic example is how satellite imagery and remote sensing plays out when it comes to private space industries. Today, if I sit down and I have the money that is needed, I can get sensitive information about any country in the world just by reaching out to probably Planet Labs or Digital Globe, because they operate constellation of satellites. They get high resolution imagery, and most times some of these imageries can be applied for military and intelligence purpose. And so these kind of um, capabilities may be applied in another hybrid attempt against somebody else, and this is operating in a reality where you have multiple non-state actors that do not have an organizational structure. They may be operating in any capacity. The next vulnerability, or the next role that private space companies play, is when it comes to navigation and timing. Private space companies such as GPS companies like Garmin and Trimble provide navigation and timing services that are critical to military operations. And these services are used for uh, targeting and navigation. And this could potentially be disrupted or manipulated for military advantage if there is a case of espionage against their systems. The last one is cybersecurity. Multiple private space companies provide cybersecurity services that are critical to protecting military and intelligence systems. And if we go beyond that, cybersecurity is required in protecting every single aspect of our society. And these services can be used to identify and mitigate vulnerabilities in these systems and to detect and respond to cyber attacks in real time. So there could be very strong systems that may be vulnerable, but a strong cybersecurity landscape will help us to mitigate these vulnerabilities. I feel like very broadly we can circle back to these three capabilities, especially in the space industry, to try and explain every single aspect of hybrid warfare.
Yes, definitely. I think you mentioned this as a very important point. Also, just go back a little bit. I think I mentioned this point previously.
Mm.
It is also very much, I would say, important to educate the private space sector. I mean, the privatization of the space industry, it's very young.
Yes.
It's not, I would say, fully matured. Even though there are several companies who are working with the military agency and all, we are still a very young industry in terms of commercialization, not in
Yes.
terms of the government space sector. But in terms of commercialization, we are still very young. We are not like other finance, industrial sectors where people have uh, decades and decades. Like arms industry. Arms industry has been flourishing since possibly I would say past 7 8 centuries.
Yeah.
But in comparison, the space industry is very young in terms
Very
of
young.
commercialization. So I believe it's going to take some more challenges, hurdles, but educating, I think, I believe the industry is still very important. And I think
Yeah.
once you educate someone, it remains forever. It's
Yes.
not like a regulation or a law which needs to revamp or revised. Educate If you educate someone, it will keep on passing to the generations. And that is, of course, again, I'm coming to the point. The academic integration is very important for
Mm.
this thing. Then only I believe the private sector's outlook on the espionage will start changing. So yeah, that's a little perspective from my side as well. Just to
And
add a layer on what Harini said. Yeah.
And I strongly feel like efforts like this, very strong initiatives like this, to just bring people, sit and have a dialogue on what may be the problems in the industry or what may be done to address these problems in the industry. Because
Yes.
I'm sure you have done at least two episodes already on espionage, and multiple other discussions that again have a little bit of a connection to what we're talking about. And I think these provide the foundation or like the base on which people can take forward and do their research on what can be done, or probably take it forward and try and address it in multiple forums and see what can be done. And I feel like these kind of dialogues really make a very big impact on the kind of subject that we're trying to understand, because trying to
Yes.
understand this topic takes a lot of effort. And these it makes it easier for us to use this framework to try and understand.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, as we are at the end of the podcast, so Harini, this last question, as always, I keep it for the students. So what message would you like to give to the students, researchers, and other stakeholders willing to participate and engage in space, defense, and security research studies?
I said it before, probably I'll change the way I look at it today. And I feel like when you have a question in your mind, or when you feel like, okay, I'm interested in defense industry, but I don't know where to start, I feel like that itself is enough to take a path and try to figure things out. But when you feel like you don't know something, the best way is to start wherever you are. Probably ask the most basic question: why study defense industry, or why do I need to know about this industry, or why do I think my interests are here, and probably take it forward from there. I feel like that will be a good point. But also, it is important that whatever we have an interest in, even if it is related to human security, even if it's related to something as simple as unconventional warfare, all of these necessarily will play into what we're trying to understand. So I think keeping our vision open, keeping a broader perspective on issues will always help us to try and understand what we're already trying to study. Little did we know that what happened in Israel on October 7th had so much to do with automatic systems, had so much to do with the failure of a hybrid warfare strategy. And I think by looking at it from that perspective, we'll try and understand a lot more about Hamas's strategy or what may have happened that day. And I feel like asking the right questions may be the best factor in such things.
Yes. Thank you very much, Harini, for providing such valuable insights. And I believe the audience will definitely take a lot of knowledge from this conversation. And as I mentioned, there have been some questions which popped up, which definitely we can continue in other podcasts.
Yes.
As I'm hoping that possibly now from next year, I'll record more podcasts with you, even more podcasts, because the series of topics and the kind of developments we are seeing in the industry, your expertise very well aligns with it as well. And the audience, of course, loves to hear to your podcast. So, yeah, looking forward to having you again. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely plan the next series of podcasts and work on them soon.
Yes.